I can tell you that I talk tech, but I really can't do the tech that you're doing. And when you look at what is unfolding in this industry, the role of software and virtual tool simulation is absolutely fundamental and truly a foundation for what we're going to see in this business. In my comments today, I'm going to talk more about some of the macro issues that do relate in many respects to what you're doing, but I'm not going to talk about what you do because that is very highly specialized. As I say, I don't do virtual simulation. I've been on a number of boards, software company boards, and appreciate the tremendously important role that software tools play, the amazing sophistication in modern tools. And we saw just in the prior comments how important these are. Also apologize for not including Mentor Graphics and IBM, and it's probably because I'm an SAE member and have been an SAE member for many, many years. But the auto sun is rising. It's rising fast, and it means that times are better, but it also means that times are moving much more quickly and things are much more sophisticated as we move into the future. My wife is an artist, and for many years she wanted to visit Florence in Italy and see probably the most famous statue in the world, which is Michelangelos David. And this is what we had expected to see, and this is what we saw, because we just returned, David had just returned from a trip to the U.S. sponsored by the fast food industry and put a little weight on in the process. And really what this was, to me, is sort of a metaphor for what happened to the auto industry. This is kind of what the auto industry was. This is what it became. And fortunately, and thanks in many ways to the kind of work that you are all doing, this is what it is becoming again. Now, I would apologize. This is not a complete representation of the statue of David. My assistant said that audiences of engineers may not be ready for the whole David, so hence the green fig leaf. But in any way, when we think about auto and it's a part of manufacturing, there are real pillars to an economy. And I think we kind of developed a distorted image. For example, a friend of mine, Sridhar Kota, has been in Washington for the last couple of years. He's just returned, and is probably the key person in the Office of Science and Technology Policy that helped the administration understand that manufacturing is really important. In fact, the prevailing view has been that tech and finance and service were kind of pillars of an economy. And in reality, it's mining, agriculture, and manufacturing. And if you don't have manufacturing, frankly, you don't have mining and agriculture as well. And when you talk about looking at the really huge components of that pillar, automotive manufacturing is absolutely unbelievably important. We're also, I think, facing a continuing challenge that people don't understand manufacturing. And part of that is related to us as engineers and technicians, that we talk to people through the products that we produce, and the average person does not see the amazing complexity that underlies the surface of something like their automobile. They have no understanding of the real enablers that let that machine, that wonderful, powerful machine that provides the kind of individual mobility that is so important to everybody. And so we all have a little bit of a challenge to do and help people understand the importance of manufacturing, and there are several dimensions to this. There are challenges. It's high fixed costs. It's unattractive to investors, say, compared to software types of companies where you don't have that massive bricks and mortar investment. Yeah, I mentioned the high level of ignorance. We have huge staffing issues that are developing. And compared to a software tool, what we produce is relatively slow to market. We have been clearly in a perfect storm, and the perfect storm is that we have seen rapid development. The BRIC countries, for example, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. We have people in Washington that don't really understand the industry, but it doesn't keep them from moving policy towards the industry. We've had wild escalations in materials, whether we're talking about the traditional materials or we get into things like the rare earths that principally come out of China. It's a hyper-competitive industry, and I think those of you that are a part of it understand that. And just one measure of this is that for the last 15 years or so, the real price of cars and trucks has actually declined when you adjust for inflation, content, and so on. The benefits issue has been a big deal. Healthcare costs have been an enormous factor in the challenges of this industry. I think those are being dealt with appropriately. And sort of the big kahuna, the giant 500-pound gorilla that was so challenging for this industry, not just here, but really on a worldwide basis, was the financial meltdown. And of course, we're seeing some of those issues continue with the significant difficulties in Europe today. Is Greece going to continue to be a part of the economic union? What about Italy and Spain and Portugal and Ireland? It's a wild, wild era. But there is something that's very special, and that's the tool set that we have to work with that we didn't have a few years back. And that tool set is what you folks are doing in terms of virtual prototyping, the modeling and simulation, the software controls of everything that's a part of a vehicle today. And I can just imagine what this world would be like for automotive had we not had those tools available. I mean, even the internet, for example, is indispensable in terms of communication around the world. Another, I think, aspect of the industry that's a bit uncomfortable is that the boundaries between things are changing. I was a professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Michigan for many years, and there was a time we would say an auto engineer was a mechanical engineer, but an auto engineer today is electronics, software, materials, electrical. There are no boundaries between these disciplines anymore. The boundaries between manufacturers and suppliers are disappearing, and certainly national boundaries as people and technology flow and capital flow so freely around the world. A big issue that is emerging, and it's probably a less significant factor here, but it is very important here, is the aging of the boomers and the impact that it's going to have on all of you in your business activity. Consumer behavior is shifting. Sociopolitical dimensions are changing. Healthcare with an aging population is a big deal. And the skilled workforce is a huge issue. And just to give you one dimension of that, here in this country, and it's worse in some other areas of the world, in the next 5 years, with the exit of the boomers, at the same time we are regrowing our industrial sector, in 5 years we will be short 10 million skilled people in our economy. In 15 years, that grows to 30 million. This is a huge deal. We kind of forgot about it during the trauma of the industry with are we going to live or die? But now it's coming back, and it's a huge issue. And it's a world issue. In fact, if you look at Japan, for example, with a birth rate of about 1.3 and limited immigration, they're going to lose 20, 30, 40 million population over the next 30 or 40 years. So you may think, well, I'm a techie, this is not a big deal. It is a very big deal, and it's going to be a problem in the future. I don't know if you're aware of it, but in Michigan, there are more than 2,000 job openings for CNC machine operators right now that cannot be filled because we don't have the talent. And in the auto industry, thousands of new jobs, but only for the educated. And even the assembly line job of the future is going to require a 2-year community college degree. Obviously, there are some areas, software engineers, electromechanical system people that are going to be extraordinarily important. But we have a huge problem, and it's one that we all need to think about. One of the areas that we're working on, we initially called it This is Auto, but it's much more now related to manufacturing, is the fact that we do not have a pipeline being developed of young people out of our K through 12 school system that will be entering the world and thinking about manufacturing related kinds of things as a career. You are part of the manufacturing endowment, and it's extraordinarily important that we energize young people to think about some of the great careers that will be in this field. The economics of the industry, and I'm a mechanical engineering guy, but I deal now more and more with economists. And when we look at some of the aspects of this, we see today roughly 1 million people employed in the auto industry. It used to be over 2 million. It's coming back, but we'll never get to the level that we once were. For example, the productivity improvements in the manufacturing plant have improved significantly. what you're doing has reduced the requirement for people in many aspects of the business. And the R&D spending in auto is greater than any other single sector. The average person has no clue that that's the case. And when you look at something like a multiplier, for example, a multiplier at an auto manufacturer, what that means is that for every job at a GM, Ford, Chrysler, Honda, Toyota, whoever, there are 9 other jobs in the economy, either in suppliers or spin-off jobs related to the income generated by that person. For a supplier, it's now up to about 6. Contrast that with a Wall Street job, which is about 2. And you can see why you're going to hear more and more about manufacturing. It's really important. This is a very unstable period, and if anybody thinks that stability is going to arrive someday, I think you're wrong. It's going to be unstable for as far as we can see in the future. The old business model that we operated according to for a long time is fading very, very fast. In many respects, it's gone. And we talked about lean and kings and physical prototypes. The new model is now lean agile. In fact, the leanest plant in North America a couple of years ago is now, it's a Ford Taurus and Sable plant just south of Atlanta. It's now under a runway of the Atlanta airport. It was lean, but it wasn't agile. The virtual prototypes that you're all here talking about are a fundamental part of the new business model. It's now emphasis on the team, not so much on the individual, and it's leaders that look like coaches more than kings. Global integration, one company worldwide. You hear the stories about one Ford. You see what Chrysler and Fiat are doing in forming a common company. GM is aimed at being one GM all over the world, and this is not an easy task, but it's essential, and it's not just in platforms and components. It's in R&D, it's plants, and everything that a company does. It cannot be multiple companies on a worldwide basis. It has to be one company. And we certainly are aware that economies of scale are still with us and are not going to go away. And the challenge is that we need to drive economies of scale to lower and lower volumes, which is a very formidable challenge. If you look back into the 50s, for example, I think Chevrolet had something like 10 plus plants building essentially the same product. That's not true anymore. And the lean, agile environment with the breakup of the market into so many new segments. Lean agile, well, people would say you're talking about the shop. No, you're talking about everything. It's investment, it's how you do engineering, it's manufacturing, it's really everything that is in the business has to conform to this whole concept of being lean and being agile. Collaboration, which is certainly one of the things that's a part of why you're here today, is critical. We talk about co-opetition, competing and cooperating between entities that historically were only competitors. But collaboration now is driven by some really significant shortages: natural resources, financial resources, human resources, and time. And so the whole idea of it's me, myself, and I, and here's my space, and there's your space, and we're always separated, that's gone. We have to function more as teams. I'm reminded of Bo Schembechler, who was a coach of football at the University of Michigan for a number of years, and he had a sign in his locker room, it's the team, the team, the team. And he had all of these prima donna athletes that came from high schools all over the country, very successful, sort of figureheads. Now you're part of the University of Michigan, and this is true of other universities as well. It's not the individual, it's the team, the team, the team. Very concerned about some potential choke points in manufacturing. I mentioned one earlier, talent. Big deal. It's going to be a huge factor going forward. But there are shortages in tooling, suppliers, equipment. We saw the impact of natural events with a tsunami and earthquake in Japan a little over a year ago. We saw the problems with floods in Thailand. And of course, there are material issues. So the idea that expansion is going to continue unabated as the market grows, yes, we hope that's the case. But we have to understand that there are choke points that could shut things down very, very quickly. In fact, it's interesting to look at our labor market here, where we heard politicians a few years ago talking about the offshoring for cheap labor. That's passed because of the tremendous productivity improvements that we have made in our systems. What I'm concerned about is the potential for offshoring of skilled labor because we don't have it here. And this is really a problem in every part of the world. Knowledge is the competitive edge. I think we would all agree with this. It's nice to be smart and rich, but frankly, smart is more important than rich these days. Together with 3 other faculty colleagues at the University of Michigan, this is way back in the last century, we started a company, turned it into 3 companies. We grew it and ultimately sold it. And what we found was the success of those companies was very straightforward. We didn't have any money when we started. We capitalized this company for $1,000, $250 each. That's undercapitalization, even back in the last century. But we figured out how to do things without a lot of money. Of course, we went to the bank, we borrowed a little money. We also found out what personal guarantee meant, which was that if the company failed, the bank moved into our house and we moved out. That was a real incentive to make things work. But smart is really, really important. And when you think about this industry, and all of you are working on different technologies, trying to facilitate the development of new products and systems, the customer is in place expecting more and more value, more features, more everything. At the same time, we have this tremendous technology push on our products and our processes. And if we think about this in terms of the knowledge creation and the knowledge application, the gap between what we know and our ability to apply it is growing very rapidly. What innovation is picking something from the knowledge curve and putting it into action, and that's what you folks are really in the process of doing. It can be a competitive advantage. It can be a competitive disadvantage. Coming soon is something, by the way, Chrysler is a part of this, GM, Ford as well, and a number of suppliers and universities, is a internet-based, sort of like a Facebook for technology. And what it enables is buyers, sellers, collaborators, and investors on given areas can come together in this virtual marketplace. And check it out at autoharvest.org. I think you'll find that it's an interesting thing that will, I think, be a facilitator to increase the speed of innovation. Time, we're all short of time, but if we think things are going to slow, that's not correct. Fast-paced change demands leverage of all resources, which means it's, again, the team. It's communication, collaboration, cooperation, alliances, and teamwork. And this, in many ways, is tough for us as technical people because we, in so many ways, we're used to kind of functioning as individuals rather than functioning as a team. Now let me close with just a couple of brief comments on technology. Are we at the edge of a revolution? I think absolutely we are. There's no question about that. Do we have all the answers? No, we don't, but we're in the process of trying to find those answers. But what often happens is that we raise more questions than we find answers to our traditional questions. If we look, for example, at auto power plants, gasoline, diesel, hybrids, fuel cells, electrics, if somebody tells you that they have the answer, it just means they probably aren't as smart as they think they are. It's a very competitive world. Some combination of these is probably what we're going to see. It's extraordinarily expensive, incredibly important in terms of our drive to improve fuel economy and drivability and all of the things that customers expect today. Future fuels, is it petroleum, bio, hydrogen, ammonia, by the way, can be used as a fuel. We don't have all of the answers. We're working on those things, but we're probably never going to have all of the answers we want. It's all going to be kind of a work in process. A big driver, a huge driver, obviously, we saw this listed in terms of what's important to customers: fuel, energy. As recent as 2008, we saw an interesting thing. In 2008, we had prices of gasoline over $4 a gallon in the summer, and before the first of the next year, it was $1.50 a gallon. A friend of mine is a guy by the name of Mike Jackson, who's the head of Auto Nation. It's the largest dealer group in the country. And he said in the summer, they couldn't find enough Priuses to sell, and by the end of the year, they couldn't give them away. And that's the reality of the marketplace that we live in today. That's why we have to be lean and agile to adapt to the kind of changes and pressures that we have. When you look at this kind of interesting curve, and it may be a little bit busy, but the shape is critical. And what it shows you is that the annual fuel cost as a function of the MPG rating of a car. This happens to be for 3 different prices of fuels. But you'll notice that if you have a truck that gets 10 miles per gallon and you can get it up to 20 miles per gallon, you've gone halfway to zero. To get to zero, you have to go from 20 miles per gallon to infinity. And one of our concerns when you look at the market today, as we're considering 50 miles per gallon or so out in 2025, 35 in just a few years, that the value that a customer receives from that improvement at fuel economy decreases at the margin as you increase this. In fact, when you look at the idea of 50 miles per gallon and the government costs, and it's easy to say something if you don't know anything, they've projected to be around $2,000 to achieve that level. Well, with what our expectations are for transportation in terms of performance and overall size, it's probably closer to $10,000. Are we going to Cubanize the fleet because literally people don't see value in this technology that has that marginal value of improved fuel economy? Tough question. We can look at the whole greenhouse issue. And the fact is, in the world today, old carbon fuels will continue to be used if they're economic. We may not use them, or they may not use them in Europe, but somebody is going to use them. And so one of our challenges is to improve fuel economy, find renewables that make economic sense, and if we do, great. If we think of some breakthrough areas, big one is advanced batteries in terms of enabling electrification, pure electrics or plug-ins. Other cellulosic or non-food biofuels, lots of good things are going on. Connected vehicles, the ability for cars to talk to one another. Huge incentives, for example, in terms of the potential for accident reduction. Some of you are probably involved in some of this stuff. An advanced material system where it's not just aluminum, steel, or various polymers, but it's some optimal combination of all of these that give us the kind of weight reduction in cost and economic performance that we're really looking for. And guess what? The invention, the basic invention is here in all of this stuff. It doesn't mean that we don't have work to do. We've got it, for example, in batteries. What is the cost today? Something in the area of $700, $800, $900 a kilowatt hour. The game isn't ready to play at that price. If we can get it down to $250 to $300 a kilowatt hour, that's when things become very interesting. And we're in this state of transition where we have the basic invention, but a tremendous amount of engineering work to do to make some of these things happen. Future direction, well, it's all a matter of economics. If the economics work, it works. If the economics don't work, we have a problem. One of my concerns, for example, related to the electrification and batteries is what we have seen out of Washington, where you have one group that says, we're going to put money into it and it'll be ready next year. Another group says it'll never be ready, and they're both wrong. And one of the things that is critical is for people to understand the reality of the world that we all live in. And when you go to places like Washington, you don't find many people that really understand that very much. I had an interesting discussion a couple of years ago with the head of MITI. It's the auto division. MITI is the Ministry of Industry and Trade in Japan. And we sat in my office for about 3 or 4 hours, and he made an interesting comment. He said, every developed country in the world understands the critical role that auto and manufacturing play in their economy. So there's only one exception to that, and that's us here in the U.S. And that's been an unfortunate challenge, but it means we have to work. And, you know, I'm an introvert engineer like most of you. I don't sound like it, but I really am. And you hear the story about the introvert engineer and comparing to the extrovert engineer. When you're talking to the introvert engineer, he's looking at his own shoes. You're talking to the extrovert engineer, he's looking at your shoes. And we don't do a very good job of communicating with the world what we do. Now, the economists talk about what they do, the lawyers, the politicians, but we in the technical community are really a pretty quiet lot. We talk through what we do, but we don't talk about some of the macro issues that are so important. And finally, I think it's important to understand that world class is a moving target. We are in a world that is going to accelerate rather than stabilize. If people are looking for a vacation where they can kind of catch their breath, guess what? Maybe that can apply to the individual, but it's not going to apply to the world that we live in. We live in a very exciting world today. I'm very excited about what you folks are doing and the kind of conference that you're having here where you're learning together, you're collaborating. But when you think about a word like excitement, recognize that it can have different meanings. I was up with my friends of old, we've done this for over 40 years, annual fishing week last week. And if I catch a big fish, I'm really excited. A big brown trout in my favorite trout stream, or playing golf. I played a little 9 holes of golf last evening and had a couple of good shots. And, I feel very excited. It keeps me coming back. I just want to have all good shots, but I'm very excited about the whole process. On the other hand, if you were to walk out of this door and there is somebody with a gun and a knife and their plan is to take your life, guess what? You're going to feel excited. And the reality is, in the world that we live in today, we have both forms of excitement going on at the same time. Thanks for your attention, and best wishes for the rest of the day in this very important conference that you are a part of. Thanks.